Second talk, it has two really independent sessions. One is I'm going to talk about open specifications and what updates we had last year. This one, and there were not too many updates, but I wanted to mention this. We still expect my announcements about features in Exchange 2016 and what we are going to implement in protocols. And before release, we definitely will have new protocol updates. But here I will just mention what changed changes we have. And I will also talk about interoperability tools and what changed in tools in last year. There are actually quite a few changes, and some of them are significant. And the second part is about REST APIs in Exchange. This is new, modern API. This is, like we have MAPI, AWS, and EAS. This is number 4. And they are not part of open specifications. They exist only in Office 365 today. But this is, I'm hearing that this is direction where new investment is going. Those are APIs that are going to be extended. They have a lot of advantages, and in fact, REST APIs are already industry standard. So I will talk about them and give you a demo. So updates in open specifications. I think the most significant is that we documented version 2.5 and 12.0. And with that, we have full documentation for all ActiveSync versions since Exchange Server 2003. And ActiveSync documentation package structure change to increase usability. We have new protocol in web services, web service item ID algorithm, and actually Outlook is using it. It is algorithm, and it defines how you create item ID, how you can generate item ID, AWS item ID, knowing storage type and internal identifier, like message ID, folder ID. And a few other changes. MAPIHTTP had, and I'm talking about last year, had improvements in documenting work with address book. We had, not everybody knows, but we actually test documentation. We have teams and extensive processes to test documentation. And we put a lot of effort to make sure that our most used documents are actually accurate, implementable, and complete. We had significant test passes, and as a result, we had a bunch of work that that was done in last year to improve the documentation, to make sure that that it is more usable. And there were, I just counted, there were about 600 fixes and changes. AWS went through quite a large number of fixes. And I also have a list of protocols, the other protocols that had large number of additions or clarifications, like ASCMD, obviously, because we documented two other versions changed and increased in size. Test tools. New parsers for message analyzers. There was talk on second track. If you didn't attend it, and use Exchange protocols. I recommend you to watch it, to just look at the video. It supports EAS, AWS, RPC, and MAPIHTTP. And with that, we are retiring Exchange RPC extractor. Not many people know what it is, but for those who need it, it's the only way to. It used to be the only way to decode MAPI or RPC communication between client and server. We just found that it's virtually impossible to modify it. It's based on very old code, and it was virtually impossible to modify it to support MAPIHTTP. And parsers are much better solution for that. So now we now have support in message analysis parsers that I think is better than what you have with RPX. I don't think we removed it, right? It's still it's still available, but definitely message analyzer is much better. And we have new test suites for ActiveSync, AWS, RPC, and MAPIHTTP released last year. Here I put some resources for this part of the talk, and I actually want to take questions for this part, because second part will be different. Any questions? Okay. Was there a question? Oh. So what it is? It's, well, REST APIs, it's industry standards and standard. Finally, we have them implemented in Exchange, available in Office 365 today. We had beta released about a year ago, and then general availability half year ago. They are very powerful. They're easy to use. They're intuitive. I was actually very surprised when I started working on demo, and my only use of those APIs is in preparation for this presentation. And I was surprised how easy it is to start working with them and get message content or calendar content. It's amazing. They're granular, and permissions are tightly scoped. I will talk about it more what it really means. In general, it's not just read or write access. It's much more. You can specify, like, can you send mail, and much more. It's based on open standards. First of all, it's OAuth, JSON, and OData. So OAuth for authentication, and the API is based on OData and has a lot of interesting features that is there just because it is OData. And I know that some other implementations also have REST APIs, other implementation on Exchange Server. Obviously, web friendly, and my last point. So Office 365 offers large sets of REST APIs. First of all, Active Directory Azure has its own set of Graph APIs. Now Exchange has support for mail, calendar, contacts. SharePoint has REST APIs, and OneDrive also has APIs for this. So you can get content for Office 365 using those APIs. And I will talk about discoverability. The thing is that they all are, if you look at them, they all look different, but because they use OData, they're discoverable, and client can actually discover how to use it without really hard coding specifics. It has a common consent framework, all of them. And what it means that application that is using those, it can ask either administrator consent or user. And it is very, very granular. Like here I have an example where application is asking, hey, can I use this? Read-write access to your email, send mail as you, and so on. Access to calendar. It's very granular. You can have, and this is significant for us, especially for enterprise usage, because Exchange administrators don't like to give send as permission to applications for very obvious reasons. They prefer like read and maybe write access, but not send mail. Yeah, I will talk about that a little bit more in details when I will talk about email here. It is secure. It uses OAuth 2.0, which is quite secure authentication. It also means that client doesn't need to deal with user credentials. And well, in most cases, application developers don't want to bother with credentials. And this is the way, using this API, it's just given. It's being done for you by OAuth, meaning that there is separate authentication entity which implements OAuth. It also supports multi-factor authentication. And, well, OAuth has this feature when you can have long-term access through refresh tokens, meaning that you can have access to the server for a long time. Application can use it when they have access tokens. But at the same time, user can revoke those tokens at any time, and all of a sudden, application will be denied access. But once it has this token, it doesn't need to ask for credentials every time. And it's really, it can be very long term. Office 365 Discovery Services, I put it this line here just to mention it, that there is very powerful discovery services in for all REST APIs in Office 365, where you can get endpoints for different services. Well, first, what services are available, then endpoints, and then metadata that describes what's available, operations and details of them available. There is rich service metadata, and the file you get, it's XML file, metadata file, which describes all entities. Here's an example, but I will show you the entire file for Exchange 365 when I do demo. We have rich tooling. .NET SDK is released and allows you to build many types of applications from many platforms. You can read what is supported. We also have Android and iOS SDKs as well. And I would highly recommend to use SDK instead of doing directly. But API is so it may be just tempting to use it directly as well. They are easy to use. So let's talk about. I'm going to talk about mail, calendar, and contacts, and specifics about them. For mail, we have 3 types of permissions: read, read-write, and send specifically. So a client can be denied send as, and, but have read and write access. Read-write is also interesting. For message to be marked as read, it needs to be, client needs to have write access. Because it's message update, it's flag on a message. There are entities and collections, entities and actions, as I said. So for mail we have folders, messages, and attachments. Obviously, messages live in folder and attachments in message. And we have bunch of different actions like create, read, update, delete. And for message, there are quite a few of them. Have reply, all forward. And the other type, create, reply, all, create, forward. It's interesting. First, like reply, all, forward, let you specify text, and it will actually send in one step. And this one will give you object, which you will need to update and then send. Here are some samples. Me is alias for current user. And inbox, obviously, is inbox. This URL changed since beta. The change is here, v1.0, which hints that there is versioning support. So there are entities and collections. There is also intuitive send API. One of the changes for final release for in general availability. In beta, send mail is actually two-step operation. You need to create mail and then send it. But here we have send mail as one operation. Calendaring. Just read or read-write permissions. More entities for obvious reasons. We have calendar groups, and you can from then you can go into different calendars. Calendar view is interesting thing. There is event is single calendar. Well, in case of recurrence, event is your master. But calendar view give you a way to ask server to expand recurrence with all the exceptions and so on, and give you the real view for some certain time period. Here are some samples. The entities and collections, and calendar view simplifies the way to get all meetings for certain for specified amount of time. Contacts. We have collection of contacts folders. So that should it's actually quite in a sense it's already maybe more powerful than ActiveSync. So we have contacts and access and actions are create, read, update, delete. And here are samples of usage. You will get access to contacts through these APIs, but you will not get access to Active Directory. So for that, you will need to use Azure Graph API. And let's do demo. So here I have I have some samples of usage. First is how to get metadata and what you will get back. So here you have quite large file describing all metadata that is available here through this API, and like if you can see what's available for message. It serves two purposes. First, just understand what's available, and second, there are tools that will build classes and product types for you using this. So service can in real life discover what can be used. This request will ask for first 5 messages. So this part of URI is actually coming from OData, and there is support for like give me first, and then and support for skip. So paging is available. Paging is possible. You can like say skip 10, give me next 4, next 5, or whatever number you want. And here I'm getting my 5 messages. Oops. This message body in HTML. Obviously, this is a lot of information. So there is a way to select specific fields, and that's again it's power of OData. And I just want to point out that how easy it is. It's the only thing that I didn't do now, what I did before to prepare, is to fill this authentication box where I specified my account, like my name and Office 365 tenant name, and my password. This is it. After that, you just send it to service entry point, and based on your authentication, it gets information for given mailbox. Few more examples here. You can do selection and order by daytime received. You can specify what goes for first, order as well. This one will give you messages that has attachments. But it actually will give you count of messages that has attachments in my inbox. This is an answer. There's 9 of them. And so on. You can actually dig into attachments as well. It's again power of OData, which I'm not going to describe in this talk. But what I'm getting here is messages with attachments and attachments. Calendar. I can request events for specific some time period, or you can use greater or equal, or less or equal. And I think I will give just one, yeah. And let me see if I can show you why. It's a little bit past in the time, the data I'm using here. But all of those are recorded meetings. Only this one is I created as standalone meeting. And that is what you got, oops, with what I'm doing. With this request. But when you request calendar view for the same week which I showed you, you get all those recurrent meetings expanded. Again, it's there's a lot of things that server is doing for you, and it makes it's much easier than with other protocols. In this example, I'm asking for give me subject of all messages that has attachment, and with that I will get the subject, and I will always get item ID. Item ID is very big line of text, but it is used. You use it later to in subsequent requests to get to this item if you need it. Calendar, contacts. You can filter by given name or other fields in contact. In this example, I'm requesting everybody with GARS, and there is one. And finally, you can get, it's not final for what you can achieve with these APIs, but what I want to show today is you can get information about you. This is metadata about current user. And you can also, and this is default, this is quite limited data. But you can actually request full metadata for the user. The difference is in this header. Which specifies that I want full or data metadata, and then you will get much more, including entry points and navigation links available for my inbox. Here, just a second. Yeah, I put together few URLs, few examples. Some of them I used in my presentation. I think it's quite useful if you want to explore it, and you can explore it now if you have a tenant in Office 365, or you can request free demo, not demo, but there is a way to just request trial tenant, and you can just play with those. And finally, resources. First is devoffice.com. It has a lot of information about REST API, including Exchange. And it has Sandbox, where you can actually play with APIs. So if you want to explore, this is the link where to start. And there's training available as well. And I think we had questions. Oh, maybe. What is?
There's also a whole Coursera course going on right now. Sorry.
Ah.
So there's also a whole Coursera course that's going on right now. Coursera is one of the online education things, so it's all video recorded and things like that. It's done by Christopher Harrison, who's a O365 content expert, and it will give you every detail you need to access this sort of stuff. So.
Oh, great. And Mark is our OData expert. You can ask him questions as well.
First quick question. When you show the examples, most of them use JSON, but at least one of them return XML. How's that?
What was XML? I think XML was metadata, right? Yeah.
Okay, so this is a common question. So the XML that you saw was the metadata that describes the service. The metadata that describes the service, as Andrew pointed out, is used for a couple purposes. It's used for generating clients and other things. And the fact that that metadata is there enables most of the JSON payloads to be really, really small. So the difference that he showed at the very end between the default metadata, or the default JSON and the full metadata JSON, that's possible because OData separates out the metadata concept from the regular data concept. So that particular endpoint that describes what the model looks like is the only thing that's not converted to JSON yet. We are trying. We're now standardized, which means that we get to work with all sorts of other partners. And frankly, like, it was a lot of work to do it in XML, and it's a lot of work to do it in JSON. We're trying to make JSON schema work as the basis for that standardization. But it is a work in process, and eventually we will have a JSON format of it. It's XML for now.
And it's really work in process, right? We are changing the check-ins, regular check-ins, maybe every week, where new features are being added to that. And since this API is generally discoverable, it allows this to happen.
Question: is this API at the moment, or is going to be used behind Outlook.com?
Sorry, I didn't get last part.
Oh, is this API right now or in the future going to be used as the API in the backend for Outlook.com?
Yes.
So, second question: can we eventually think that in the future on Outlook.com we would have just like an entry field where we can specify what is the server that we want in the backend? Just use, we've been talking about run kube next.
It will be available for Outlook.com when migration to Office 365 will happen. Will finish.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Another question. I saw you mention OAuth 2.0, and you also mentioned you use it for authentication. You didn't mention OpenID Connect though. So what flavor of OAuth 2.0 are you using for authentication and for authorization?
Well, that's a good question about this authorization, obviously.
So yeah, so this was something that we touched on briefly in the session just before this one, the other room, but it is a problem that there are multiple flavors of OAuth 2. Generally speaking, I think the overall industry momentum for REST APIs is pointing towards OAuth pretty heavily. And because of the security problems with OAuth 1, almost everybody's going to OAuth 2. I think it's fairly easy to go out and survey the major REST APIs like Dropbox, Google, Facebook, etc., and see that they're all using OAuth 2. We've had similar problems with OAuth 2. So I work with a bunch of people at Microsoft on consuming OData services, and a lot of them are secured by OAuth 2. And it's a problem, right? Like, so in Excel can connect to OData services natively, but they have to go do all that work to get, okay, this tweak of OAuth 2. I assume the industry will eventually iron those kinks out. I hope that Microsoft is working to help. I don't know for sure specifically, but it is a problem. I don't have a good answer for you.
And I also want to mention that today in Office 365, we enabled basic authentication. Reason being to let people just try EPS without messing with those. And that's what I used in my demo.
Today we see Outlook is already using a mix of MAPI and EWS. For example, when you click on out of office, an EWS call is made. So can we expect that the next version of Outlook might also do some REST calls? Or
I don't know. I seriously don't know. Today, MAPI has everything that is available through the data. So that's basically an answer. Like Outlook is using EWS, but you know why it's using EWS?
No.
There are some features that are better available in EWS, like access to freebies information, mail tips, or Agao is implemented in both. So that's why it's using AWS. The main protocol is MAPI, and it never falls back to something else, like Julian suggested in previous talk. Yeah.
No more questions?
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.